watching Primetime. I'm Tamanna Inamdar.
And my name is Ayush Alavadi. Let's take a look at the headlines first. The central government prepones the deadline for cleaner fuels by 2 years. Petroleum Ministry makes Bharat Stage 6 fuel mandatory in New Delhi from April 2018 ahead of its initial April 2020 deadline.
Delhi's Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal meets Haryana CM Manohar Lal Khattar in Chandigarh, says both governments will jointly work to create a cleaner environment.
Indian markets end with losses for the third straight day. Weak global cues and sell-off in the metal space drag the markets down.
This earnings season has been the best for India's top companies in 5 quarters. 40 of the Nifty 50 companies beat expectations, led by autos and banks. As the capital continues to reel under a cloud of pollution, the central government has decided to fast-track its deadline for cleaner fuels by 2 years. The Petroleum Ministry has said that Bharat Stage 6 fuel will be made mandatory in New Delhi from April 2018. That's well before its initial schedule of April 2020. This, the government hopes, will help in reducing pollution levels in the choking capital. Just how much of an impact will this have on oil marketing companies and automakers? Well, Krishanu Mukherjee finds out in this report.
The directive of the Oil Ministry to mandate oil marketing companies to migrate to the cleaner BS6 fuel in Delhi from the 1st of April 2018, which is just 5 months from now, has implications on 3 sectors, 2 sectors, and the third one being the environment as a whole. The 2 sectors are the automobile sector and, of course, the oil marketing companies. Coming to the automobile sector first, automakers have told us today that this move is going to have no impact on them, largely because the BS4 vehicles that they already sell in the country can very conveniently run on BS6 fuels. When it goes to them migrating their own vehicles to the BS6 norms, they said they're sticking to the government mandated timeline of doing that on the 1st of April 2020, and there is no advancement in that. So this, as a result, leaves away the automobile sector unimpacted. From what has come out today. For the oil marketing companies, of course, this is going to have an impact, considering now, at least within the city of Delhi, within the national capital territory, they are going to make do with having all the petrol pumps moving to the cleaner BS6 norms. Now, we've spoken to experts, and they've told us that this requires all the petrol pumps and their tanks being cleaned up and being put in with the cleaner fuel, and there is a cost involved. Now, the number that has been floating for a while now from all the oil marketing companies for migration to BS6 fuels is 30,000 crores, but that's the number for migration to to BS6 across the country, which is migrating their refineries. For Delhi specifically, the costs will have to be calculated. Now, when it comes to the environment, the third part, the issue is that while it's only the fuel that's moving, BS6 compliant fuels, the BS6 fuels have way lower sulfur content. So if not completely, we can still imagine that the emissions with BS4 vehicles running on BS6 are going to be lower than what they are on when they're running on BS4 compliant fuels.
All right, now T. Jayaraman, professor at School of Habitat Studies at the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, joins us now through Skype. Mr. Jayaraman, thanks so much for joining us on Bloomberg Quinn. I want to start by asking you, this transition to BS6 norms, from your experience, how would this really help in tackling the pollution menace in the capital city?
Well, I wouldn't say my experience. I think the experience of fuel transitions generally, a good fuel is as good as the quality of the engine that uses it. So obviously, if you have vehicles that are not tuned to the optimal settings for using the new fuel, then clearly the impact of the new fuel is not going to be as much as it might have been. What exactly it will be is something that will have to be worked out, and that requires more detailed calculation that than one can sort of do offhand. But as long as we are not able to replace the fleet, and India is really a question of our whole economy. There are huge sectors which use, because of capital constraints, because of resource constraints, they use technology of a lower level, which impacts efficiency, fuel and emission pollution efficiency in this case.
Mr. Jayaraman, it's interesting you say that because a lot of automakers today have come and said that even though the fuel may change by 2018, their vehicles which adhere to BS6 standards will be ready only by the original deadline of April 2020. In fact, some of them have said that you can still use BS6 fuel in a BS4 compliant vehicle, so that's not a problem. But will it make any difference then in that case?
Yeah, but you see, it is as I repeat, this is not a question that it will require really, especially if automakers claim it, it will require expert input to actually determine what it is that suppose you take a BS4 compliant vehicle and you run it on BS6 fuel, you run it on BS4 fuel, or you take a BS6 compliant vehicle and run it on BS6 fuel. So in all three cases, which will give lesser emissions to what extent is not something that we can get into offhand. The other point I want to make is there is always this two-way thing between automakers say and this is say, where is there an independent study? There has to be an independent study or a couple of studies which takes the numbers, which does perhaps a couple of experiments and finds out what it is, what is the real answer.
Okay, I'm just going to
sort of
Sure. Mr. Jayaraman, I'm just stopping you there because I want to include Mr. R.C. Bhargav, Chairman of Maruti Suzuki in the conversation. Good evening, sir, and thank you for speaking with Bloomberg Quint. Now, the deadline for BS6 fuels have been advanced by 2 years. Do you see any impact on automakers?
You know, it's an absolutely wrong notion that any deadline has been advanced. I think people don't appreciate that if BS fuel is to be available throughout the country by 2020, it can't be done by starting that process on the 30th of March and completing it on the 31st of March 2020. The production of BS6 fuel will be ramped up gradually in the refineries. It doesn't happen that the day they convert to BS6, they will get full production of whatever amount of petrol and diesel we use, which may be 40, 50 million tons coming out from day one. It doesn't happen like that. The distribution system, the changing of pumps from BS4 to BS6 will all take time. It's a phased program. I think people should ask the petroleum companies as to what is their plan for extending the BS6 availability throughout the country. Just by making it available in Delhi or the NCR does not make it the advancement of anything. The date fixed for petroleum products to be BS6 compliant is 31st of March 2020. What is the schedule for that, the whole country? Why do we talk only of Delhi and not of the whole country? So this whole idea is wrong, the thinking that because Delhi has got BS6, therefore BS6 vehicles will come to Delhi. It doesn't happen like that.
Right, Mr. Bhargav. Also, as a follow-up to that, clearly BS6 compliant vehicles can run, BS4 compliant vehicles can run on BS6 fuel as well. So I just want to understand, so as a corollary to what you just said, what does this really mean? Because if these vehicles will be running on that fuel, in terms of abating to some extent the pollution problem, could we expect some sort of lesser sulfur emissions? Is that the intent according to you?
The diesel vehicles using BS6 fuel in the NCR will emit obviously less sulfur dioxide and things like that. But sulfur dioxide emissions in Delhi is not a problem. It's well within the prescribed limits. The relief which we need in Delhi is from PM 2.5.
Right.
And the sources of generation of PM 2.5, which are the major sources, are not being tackled. Right. Everybody diverts attention somewhere else, which are the minor causes. The major causes, because the administration is unable to tackle those causes, remain untouched.
No, when you talk about PM 2.5, I'm just looking at this IIT Kanpur study, Mr. Bhargav, which does say that vehicular pollution and road dust among them are major causes.
Vehicular pollution is 20%.
Yes.
The dust arising from roadside construction activities, burning of solid waste, fly ash, that's 38%. That 38% is not being tackled at all. In the vehicle pollution, cars are 10% of that 20%. That's 2% of the total. The entire focus of everybody is on that 2%. What about the remaining 18% of vehicular pollution, which comes from trucks, which comes from three-wheelers, which comes from two-wheelers, which comes from vehicles like tempos? That's not being looked at. The only attention is on cars, and cars are 2% PM 2.5 according to Kanpur of the total pollution.
Mr. Bhargav, just as a long-term sort of solution, and I want your outlook on it as well, to solve such a problem, and like you said, it's not just Delhi NCR, it's all over northern India and in other cities around the country as well. As a long-term solution, would automakers like Maruti and Suzuki say, well, an electric push is required to sort out these issues?
We require a push for all those areas which generate PM 2.5. Because the Western countries get polluted by cars doesn't mean India gets polluted by cars. The Western countries don't have the dust sources which we have. So looking at their solutions and doing a cut and paste job for India is not the answer. Look at the Indian sources of pollution, the Delhi sources of pollution. What is the methods which should be done there? Why is that not being tackled?
No, absolutely. May I ask you a question, sir? Because over the last few days, we've been speaking to various people who have points of view on the pollution crisis as a whole, and farmer groups say that don't just point fingers at us for crop burning without giving us an alternative. Going back to the firecracker ban, at that point people said it was a very small segment of pollution, it was unfair to target it. In that context, if every part of the problem says that don't look at me first, won't it make it that much tougher to find a solution?
No, therefore that is why I have been saying that identify in terms of the contribution to pollution of all the sources of pollution. Rank them in order of merit and then tackle them according to that order of merit. Otherwise, everybody will say that I am not the polluter. But there are scientific studies which point out which source contributes how much of the pollution. So why don't we go along with that study and list the sources of pollution in order of their demerit and then find solutions to those areas instead of everybody picks up on one item and then says, oh, that is what we should do or we should not do.
I'm just going to get Mr. Jayaraman in for his point of view, and I hope you will just wait for a few more minutes, Mr. Bhargav, but he wanted to come in on the conversation we're having. Yes, Mr. Jayaraman.
I think I agree that we need to list all the sources of pollution, and I agree we need to tackle all of them. But I don't think we can have a simple ranking of this is 38%, this is 15%, this is 10%, this is 2%, so 2% comes last. I don't think it works like that. I think there's a question of equity, there's a question of whose livelihoods depend on it. And if the middle class is so concerned about pollution, then you ought to have done something about people burning waste for fuel and heat all over the city. You never did that. Just when you touch the cars, then everybody goes ballistic about, don't touch my cars, is only 2%. So everybody has to make a sacrifice. And the sacrifice begins with those who can afford it and not with those who are the least capable of affording it. So I agree, rank all the sources of pollution, find out what we have to do about each of them, but in all of them, we have to give some place to these considerations also. It's not a straightforward ranking, and 2% is the one which will come last. I'm sorry.
Okay, so Mr. Bhargav, if you want to respond to that, and also...
I don't understand why it is not a straightforward ranking. Ranking is always straightforward if data is used. and you rank them, you may do something for all of them. That is not the issue. I'm not saying don't do anything for anybody. But certainly rank them first and see what is happening. You see heaps of dust, mud along the roadside. Look at today's Times of India picture. Now, why is that so? Why can't those heaps of dust be covered with plastic or tarpaulin so that that dust doesn't fly into the air? Who's getting hurt by that? Only contractors. When the buildings are done, why are the buildings not covered when the demolition or construction happens? Who's that hurting? The building contractors. It's not the poor man who's getting hurt. Very rarely is the poor man getting hurt by any of this. We just make a excuse that the poor man is getting hurt and the rich man is getting away with it. That's not true.
Sure. You know, this we can. I'm just going to. We need a lot of views to talk about this issue, and of course, it needs broader solutions. But Mr. Bhargav, I'm just going to ask one more question. Is there any plan, or do you think you envision a situation where automakers, including yourself, would look at perhaps advancing deadlines for BS6 compliant vehicles from 2020?
Please get the petroleum ministry to say by when they will have BS6 available throughout the country.
No, would you look at advancing your own deadlines or your own schedules?
I cannot advance the deadline if the fuel is not available, because a BS6 car cannot run on BS4 fuel. Please understand that. If I put out BS6 cars and BS6 fuel is not available, it's just going to be bad for everybody.
Okay. Thank you so much, R.C. Bhargav and T. Jayaraman. We'll leave it there, but some very crucial points are being made there on the entire pollution debate. And Ayush, always interesting to get those two perspectives,
Absolutely.
An automaker and an environmentalist. And I guess pehle aap doesn't work.
And that was a fascinating insight
pollution.
in the end as well, Tamanna, saying if there's no fuel, well, maybe I can't make those cars. I mean, it comes to that. Maybe that's going to be one of the talking points very soon on a primetime debate.
Sure, absolutely. Meanwhile, Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal finally met his Haryana counterpart, ML Khattar, in Chandigarh today. Kejriwal arrived in Chandigarh along with Delhi Environment Minister Imran Hussain and Environment Department Secretary Keshav Chandra. Just yesterday, the Aam Aadmi Party government filed a fresh review petition in the NGT asking it to reconsider the exemptions for the odd-even scheme. In fact, the Kejriwal government has asked for the scheme to be implemented by neighbouring states as well. After the meeting, Kejriwal said both Haryana and Delhi governments will work together for a clean environment, while Haryana Chief Minister Manohar Lal Khattar says the pollution problem in Delhi is a common concern for all the neighbouring states.
सबसे पहले तो हमें ये समझना पड़ेगा कि हमारी टेरिटरीज अलग-अलग हो सकती हैं। हरियाणा की ये टेरिटरी है, दिल्ली की ये टेरिटरी है, पंजाब की ये टेरिटरी है, लेकिन हवाओं के ऊपर किसी का कंट्रोल नहीं है। और जब पूरे उसमें प्रदूषण फैला है, इधर की हवा उधर और उधर की हवा इधर आती है, हम सब लोगों को मिलकर इसका समाधान निकालना पड़ेगा। इसीलिए ये बहुत जरूरी है कि जो टॉप पॉलिटिकल एग्जीक्यूटिव है, सभी राज्यों की भी, केंद्र की भी, उन सब लोगों को मिलकर इसका समाधान निकालेंगे, तभी इसका समाधान निकल सकता है।
उत्तरी भारत के कई राज्यों में, खास करके नेशनल कैपिटल रीजन में जो स्मोक का एक प्रकोप आया और ये कई दिन लगातार चल रहा है, आज से कुछ ठीक भी हुआ है और ये पिछले 2 वर्ष से ऐसा हो रहा है। अब ये कोई समस्या किसी एक प्रांत की नहीं है, बल्कि कॉमन कंसर्न है।
Well, there's more to bring you about Delhi's pollution problems. Now, while pollution levels in Delhi continue to remain high, of course, the Delhi Half Marathon has come under intense scrutiny. The Indian Medical Association has urged the organizers to call off the event, citing a health hazard. So is the Delhi Half Marathon truly the world's most dangerous race? Here's a special report.
43 of the world top 100 ranked athletes from 39 countries.
Marathons are all about pushing your body to the limit. But in the capital city of New Delhi, that takes on an entirely new meaning.
I was like, let me just go for a run. It won't do me much harm. But then within like 15-20 minutes, I had a red nose. I was panting heavily, and I'm a person who has no breathing problems, let me tell you that.
Runners like Tanmay have been preparing for the city's most popular race, a half marathon that attracts everyone from local enthusiasts to Olympic athletes.
Now you slightly lift your hip up off the ground.
While Delhi remains covered in a toxic smog, runners continue to train, some with their faces covered. But just how bad is it? Smoke 2 packs of cigarettes, and then some. According to the Indian Medical Association, that's the impact Delhi's air will have on your lungs in one day.
The runners would like to run because they don't know, they are not doctors. The effects of pollution will not come in one day. They are not interested, they are not bothered about what is going to happen to them after 10 years.
That's Dr. Kejriwal, the national president for the Indian Medical Association. He says running in these conditions is not just harmful, it's potentially fatal.
2 years back at Beijing, 6 marathon runners have developed a heart attack.
Tanmay has been a regular at Delhi marathons. He's heeded IMA's advice and dropped out this year. Others refuse to throw in the towel, hoping things will take a turn for the better.
The fact of the matter is pollution is there for last week. It has really been high, and which we all understand because of all this smog which is happening. But now it is settling down, so we will also go with it.
I'm hoping the fact that I'm a little fitter and that I think my breathing is better will help counteract. I mean, I hope that's right.
The IMA has repeatedly asked for the event to be cancelled, saying it puts an entire community at risk. Airtel, the main sponsor, has threatened to drop the event next year if Delhi's pollution problems are not addressed. The promoter of the race insists the health concerns are short-sighted, piggybacking on a Supreme Court decision which said runners have a fundamental right to run. So, the IMA is making one last-ditch effort. It's hoping the courts will intervene and at the very least, postpone the event.
Now, government sources say that the bank recapitalization plan is finally taking off. How will the bank recap plan impact the bad loan scenario? Vishwanath Nair tells us in this report.
What the government sources essentially said is that from the recapitalization bond side, you will start seeing about 70,000 crore worth of issuances in this financial year. The government sources also said that about 18,000 crore worth of budgetary support, which was assigned for the banks, will also flow in during this financial year. This is part of that 2.11 lakh crore recapitalization plan that the government had announced last month, where it said that it is going to start to give the banks the arsenal to fight with the bad loan issue. So a lot of that money will start coming in. Essentially what this will do is that it will strengthen the capital position of the banks and will give them the ability to negotiate better with potential buyers in some of these NCLT cases and otherwise wherever haircuts are necessary. So since they have a strong capital position, they will be able to take steeper haircuts if necessary and will be in a better position at least while negotiating with these potential buyers. So that way we'll be able to resolve the NPA problem better.
Okay, so it's a special day today because I walked into office earlier in the day and I saw my colleague Tamanna sitting in the studio, well, with someone very special, Vidya Balan. What were you doing with Vidya Balan today?
You know, it was so interesting. So she was, of course, here to talk about her new movie. I had a chance to sit down with her and speak with her. And it was a really interesting conversation. We'll play that out a little later in the show on Primetime Debate, so you must watch it. But she's talked about work-life balance. She's talked about, I asked about the Weinstein impact in Bollywood, you know, sexual harassment. Would the industry here have the gumption to pull the plug on big stars if such allegations came through, the whole Me Too movement, and she's spoken about all of those things very frankly. It was an interesting, candid chat, so you must stick on for that.
No, absolutely, because I saw everyone in office hooting and clapping, and it seemed like a really fun, interesting day. So a conversation, something we're definitely going to be tuned into. Moving on for a quick check on all the action from the Lal Street. Indian markets ended with losses for the third consecutive day. Weak global cues and selling pressure in commodities space led to this fall. Both the Sensex and the Nifty incurred losses over 0.5 percentage point. Asian Paints and Kotak Mahindra Bank were the top gainers, while Sun Pharma and ONGC were the top losers.
Now, all Nifty companies have come out with their quarterly earnings, and if there's one key takeaway, then it's this. July to September was better than the previous quarter. But was the cheer shared by all, or were there some who missed the bus? Yet again, Darshan Mehta has put together an exhaustive list on the earnings in this report.
It's been a decent quarter because if you're looking at the numbers that were strong, 16 came out with strong numbers. The yellow one, that is this part, is the meat estimates, and 10 were actually weak. So overall, in the second half of the earnings season, I think the number of companies which reported strong numbers managed to pick up. So auto as a pack did well, cement did well, on the oil space not so much. You had Tech Mahindra from, so it's all varied. Couple of pharma companies there. Basically the banks were in line with what the estimates were, and metal as a sector was rather weak. So individually, let's take some of them and we can give an indication of what exactly happened. So just look at this. So the number of, this was 2 quarters ago, the number of strong has actually moved from 23 down to 13 and up to 16. The number of weak earnings have gone down. So from 12 it went up to 19 and it's come down. And what has been most is that from 15 to 24, the number of inline. So if you combine this, it's a decent number, and the number of weak earnings have gone down significantly. Individually, let's take a look at it. Auto companies, one of the best performing quarters in the recent past. All the four-wheelers did extremely well. So you had your Maruti as well as M&M and Tata Motors, all of them gave strong numbers. In the two-wheelers, Bajaj Auto was outperforming while Hero and Eicher met the estimates. So auto as a pack did extremely well. The other sector that we need to focus on is the cement company. Ultratech and ACC performed better than Ambuja. ACC is no longer part of the Nifty, but if you take a comparison, yes, it was an inline quarter for Ambuja, and it's the 4th straight quarter for a strong number by Ultratech. So Ultratech by far is the best cement company. For construction company, L&T gave in a very strong quarter, but the order inflow guidance was disappointing, and that is why the counter did manage to correct. The other one is the consumer companies, Asian Paints, HUL, ITC, all of them meets estimates as far as numbers were concerned, volume growth was concerned, commentary was concerned. Utilities also muted set of numbers, NTPC and Power Grid met estimates, no surprises, management commentary was also the same. Now oil and gas, muted quarter for Reliance. After 2 strong quarters, the only big positive that came in for Reliance was that Jio turned a bit positive, and that was something that helped the counter rally. GIL was the only oil and gas company which came out with strong set of numbers. ONG disappointed, the oil marketing companies disappointed. So that's the broad consensus for oil and gas companies. For bank, private sector banks met estimates, weak quarter for Axis Bank on the financial front as well as asset quality. Yes Bank came out with strong numbers, but asset quality was the big worry for Yes Bank. As far as SBI, only PSU in the Nifty, one of the best numbers among private sector banks as well as public sector banks, came out with strong set of numbers. Slippages also came in much lower. For NBFCs, the new entrant was Bajaj Finance, met estimate. Indiabulls Housing Finance came out with strong set of numbers, while HDFC met estimate. So it was a decent quarter for NBFCs also. As far as IT is concerned, all the 4 big companies met estimates. Guidance remained a concern. Tech Mahindra, which is the 5th largest company, came out with strong set of numbers. As far as media is concerned, Zee is the only one. Strong set of numbers by Zee Entertainment this time around. For pharma companies, Sun and Lupin met estimates. Dr. Reddy, Cipla and Aurobindo came out with strong set of numbers, but for Dr. Reddy and Aurobindo, the commentary was not the best that you could have. As far as the agri company is concerned, UPL is the only one which came out with weak set of numbers. The other one will be pretty much the metal counters. Vedanta and Hindalco met estimates. Tata Steel was weak, and Coal India again for the 5th straight quarter, weak set of numbers. And finally for telecom companies, 2nd straight quarter of strong growth for Bharti Airtel. Bharti Infratel met estimates. So overall, if you're looking at the numbers that came out, it's not a bad picture that you are seeing, but a lot of companies came out with inline set of numbers this time.
So that was obviously Darshan telling you what happened with Nifty companies. But tell me something. Do the markets really factor in what's happening in Gujarat with the elections?
Absolutely, they do. And that's the first thing we're talking about on Primetime Debate this evening. It's coming right up. Right after that, we're going to take the market view. And we're really going to ask 2 top market participants why they care about the Gujarat elections. What's the big deal? Why are the markets tracking this election so closely? That and, of course, the wonderful chat I've had with Vidya Balan earlier today. Don't miss it. Primetime Debate is going to be fun this evening.